welcome back to the program. Dana Lash here. It's Friday. We don't care. She actually should get an award for hair. She has, in fact, we're going to come up with an award and give Carol Roth, who describes herself. She's like one of the smartest people in economics, and she's recovering, not retired. She's like 10. She's a recovering investment banker, an entrepreneur. She's a New York Times bestselling author of a book that'll scare the hell out of you. You will own nothing. You will own nothing. And she's an activist on behalf of economic illiteracy and the best hair out there. Carol Roth joins us now. Carol, always so good to have you, my sister in the fight. I'm going to get to Jerome Powell because first, and then we got to talk about the petrodollar because I've not heard anybody talk about this. And my first thought was, we got to get Carol. Where are they? They're not looking at what we're living, clearly.
No, they're living in an alternate reality, and they have been for quite some time. And, if you are part of the wealthy and well-connected and the elite, you're probably doing quite well because not only is the cost of living been inflated, but also assets have been inflated. So all the people who J. Pow, as I've decided to call him, is hanging around with, they're probably sitting around being like, well, my life's okay. I don't know why everybody's so angry. Meanwhile, the data shows since Joe Biden took office, more than 20% cumulative inflation. And we know that that's underreported by probably a factor of at least 2. But, you listen to the things they say. First of all, we're going to, listen to the data. Well, the Fed, if they're going to be data dependent, how are they doing that? Because we know the data isn't dependable. It continues to get revised. It continues to go through different adjustments. We know fewer people are responding to surveys. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's a different set of data that they're getting than we're getting, but certainly anything that we see isn't dependable and isn't telling the same story. And just the epic amount of gaslighting that's been going on, these are the same people. Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, Janet Yellen's final press conference under Trump, she said the biggest issue was that inflation was too low. She had the nerve to say that back then. Then in May of 21 under Biden, she said she didn't see inflation, going to be a problem. Then inflation started to get stoked. Then it was transitory. We hear the same thing out of the Fed. So when they've been wrong about just about everything, why is it that we're hanging on their every word? Why do they even have this mandate that they supposedly have from Congress? Because obviously they're not doing a real great job of it.
That's a great point as well. I remember her saying that, and I've never heard anyone say that inflation was too low. Like, is that a problem? Like, I don't think that's even an issue. Talking with our good friend Carol Roth, and you can get her newsletter too, by the way, at carolroth.com/news that she sends out all kinds of good stuff on. I want to come back to this because I think that all of this is affected by what we're about to talk about now. The news came out that the Saudis are no longer going to be requiring sales of crude in U.S. currency. So nobody's going to have this reserve currency of our American dollars, and using that as like the standard for energy, for oil purchasing from the Saudis. They said they're also going to be dealing in all these other currencies as well. Yeah. Where there is I've not heard a single thing, Carol, from the administration on this. No one has spoken about it. Janet Yellen hasn't said anything about it. Pete Buttigieg, Department of Transportation, Jen Granholm over at Energy, not a single person said anything about this. And Biden's now got his whole family over in Italy, the great, National Lampoon's Puglia vacation over there. In the meantime, we're watching the petrodollar die and our economic dominance wither. This is disastrous.
Yeah, it's crazy. I didn't even know that there was an expiration date on that agreement. I thought it was an ongoing thing. And then all of a sudden, just quietly, this went away. This is something that if you want to get into the weeds on, I actually have a whole chapter where we talk about this and You Will Own Nothing, which you were so kind to endorse. And you can really kind of understand what happened. But basically, when we went off the gold standard, there was this quiet delegation that went over to the Saudis and made this deal. And they basically said, okay, you agree that dollars is what we're going to price oil in throughout the world. And not only that, so that's sort of the trading part of it, but that you are going to take the excess dollars that you have and you are going to plow them back in and buy treasuries with them. And that was in exchange for us supporting Saudi Arabia from a military standpoint. That was basically the deal that was cut. And this was so secretive that for a very long time, I think until Bloomberg uncovered it, that they didn't break out treasury purchases from Saudi Arabia. They just sort of lumped them in regionally because they didn't want anyone to know that this was an actual deal that had happened. So the big shift that is happening now, and we've seen this throughout the BRICS, and by the way, the shift that is happening is not like an outside move, power move. This is all internal. This, going back to the Fed, as we're talking about, the Fed has not kept the dollar stable on an international front or internally, not domestically either. And so when you have commodities, whether it is oil or whether it is food, things that people need to live for their economy that are priced in dollars, and that dollar is not stable, and all of a sudden it's costing more and more dollars for them that they don't have, and they have to go into their reserves and exchange, and it becomes more expensive for them. That becomes a national security issue for these countries. That becomes, an issue of being able to feed and have electricity in their country. So of course, over time, if we don't manage the dollar appropriately, that's going to be an issue. And President Biden and his administration, without Congress, weaponized the dollar even further this year when they decided to seize Russia's assets. So who wants to have their reserves in dollar-based assets if the U.S. at any point in time can come in and say, just kidding, we're taking them, and trying now to find a way to give those over to Ukraine. So this is our fault. And what is going to shift and change is we are going to have fewer central banks buying dollars, which, by the way, they've been onto this since the Great Recession financial crisis. The last 10 years, central banks around the world have actually been net sellers by about, I think, the last I saw was about 100 billion, maybe even more at this point, of our treasuries. So they haven't been the ones buying them on net. That is going to accelerate. They're going to put more treasuries in the market, which means more supply, which is going to impact interest rates. So that means the U.S. government will not be able to borrow cheaply and continue to finance their deficits on the cheap, and it is going to raise the cost of living. And that's the reserve part. Then there's the trade part. It's going to lessen the amount of trade that is being done in dollars as well. This all threatens our status, as the world's reserve currency. And given the fact that we have 120% debt to GDP, and that's projected to grow, that then creates more of a chance for us to have a sovereign debt crisis. The only reason we have not seen everything blow up at this point in time is because we are the world's reserve currency. And so this shift is a huge threat to that. And not enough people are paying attention. They're just kind of going, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I'm sure it's okay. None of this is okay, and is going to have grave consequences, 100% because of what the U.S. has done, their shoddy management of the country's financials, this crazy amount of debt we have, this insane central bank that has been derelict in its duties, and none of the people involved, Dana, are going to be held accountable.
It's criminal. It's criminal. We're talking with Carol Roth, who just expertly explained how this is going to all distill down, how it's going to affect everyone. Because you made a great point. The reason that we haven't blown up from a lot of our bad decisions is because we were the world's currency, or the reserve currency, and now we're not anymore. How quickly does that impact come?
So we still are. I would say that we still have the stronghold. And it's interesting because what we're seeing is that when these currencies are being replaced, these central banks, they're not plowing them into other currencies. So it's not like we're losing and you're seeing a big, jump in yuan. What are you seeing a jump in? Gold.
Yes.
That is becoming the de facto. So I would keep an eye on that. And it's one of those things, it's kind of like the Hemingway attributed phrase, how did you go bankrupt? Very slowly and then all at once. We don't know when that specific point in time is going to be. I think this is going to be more like death by 1,000 cuts than like one big crisis. It's just we're going to see this slow slide, and all of a sudden you're going to wake up one day and be like, things are just much worse, and they're going to blame it on anything and everything else. Usually you're a Republican or somebody who's MAGA or whatever it is, but that's going to be just all of these small issues that like snowball into a really big issue.
And that gets in because one of the pieces that I read to tie all these two issues together, it was, I think it was USA Today, was it USA Today or Forbes? Anyway, they were examining the Trump campaign, the Biden campaign, talking about tax cuts, and how, I love their perspective was how to pay for them, because Biden obviously wants to increase taxes. On top of all of this, refusal to cut government spending, increase taxes, furthering drive inflation. That's just going to expedite all of this so much.
Yeah, so I don't like the phrase "who is going to pay for tax
Oh,
cuts,"
I hate it.
because tax cuts is letting you keep your own money. There
Yeah.
is no paying for that. What it is that if you are changing the tax system, then you have to right size spending. And oh, by the way, there isn't a direct correlation. We saw after the Trump tax cuts that the revenue to the government continued to increase. That is why Joe Biden never overturned that during his tenure, because he has taken in more and more revenue. Because when you put money in productive hands, it creates growth and opportunity versus when you put it in government hands.
Yes.
And so, the idea that all of a sudden you're going to raise taxes and that's not going to slow down the economy is farcical. And it totally does get away from the issue of changing and addressing government spending. And unfortunately, we don't have the political will on either of those fronts to do much. So I think then you end up with drawer number 3, which let's make a deal is often the zonk. And that becomes, how do you take care of these huge deficits? And ultimately, as that goes into the debt, well, you end up monetizing it. And then that causes longer term inflation. And I think the trajectory that we're on is just basically telling us that inflation is going to continue to be with us. They're going to continue to normalize it. Their quote unquote 2% target, which is a joke because, Janet thought that inflation was too low. We had to have it at least 2%. Target's going to creep up and is now going to become 3% or whatever it is. And you're going to have the middle and working class having a harder and harder time of attaining the American dream, while the wealthy and well-connected continue to do better. And you're just going to see that gap widen, and on a non-merit-based basis.
Oh,
Listen,
gosh.
if somebody creates something and has lots of productivity and they gain something from it, that's great. I have no problem with the inequality. But when it is done on a non-merit-based basis by government and monetary policy, that is just stealing the American dream from middle America.
Yeah. One last quick question for you. Talking with our friend Carol Roth, the author of the bestseller "You Will Own Nothing: Your War with a New Financial World Order and How to Fight Back." And of course, make sure you get our newsletter at carolroth.com/news, because we're touching on it. Inflation. We keep hearing that, oh no, it's cooling, it's fine, it's going away. The Feds didn't cut the interest rates though, so I need a little bit more than that. Because they keep telling us it's okay. Well, we're not seeing it in how the Fed acts or in anything else. CPI data, none of it.
Yeah, I mean, my best analogy is weight. So, you go on a binge one year, you gain 10 pounds. It happens to all of us. You go to the doctor, they say, you got to do something about this. You say, okay, I'm going to try. The next year you come back and you've gained 4 pounds. What does the doctor say? Is to say, wow, you've really controlled your weight gain.
Yeah.
Good job. You only gained 4 pounds this year versus 10. No, he goes, you're up 14 pounds. You're fat. You don't fit into your jeans anymore. You got to do something. And that's the discussion we have, that all of a sudden we're up, the equivalent of the 20 pounds, which is really 40 if they were being honest about it. And they're going, you look great. You look fantastic. It's okay that you're wearing elastic waist pants. Don't worry about it.
Just stay in those pants. It's great. They look great anyway. It's
Thanksgiving
the style.
pants.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Our friend Carol Roth, you can find her at Carol J.S. Roth. Find her on X. I keep up wanting to say Twitter. And make sure to find her at carolroth.com/news. Get that newsletter. Get her book. It's like a terrifying book. It's going to, make it into a horror film. It'll be like an economic horror film. Carol, always good to see you. Have a great weekend, my friend. Thank you.
You too. Take care.